John, we were up and at 'em today as we talk about our inside voice.
Yes.
Inside voice. You remember when you were a kid, and like, this is me. Maybe your childhood. I suspect maybe this is your childhood, but you probably heard this a lot from the teachers or authorities in buildings where you're supposed to be behaving, and they would say, "John, you need to use your inside voice." You're like, inside of you, you're like, I have things to say, and I want to express, I want to emote, kind of thing. This isn't appropriate in this environment to act like this.
That's very complimentary because you're assuming that I was not raised in the woods like a Neanderthal. So, thank you.
It's like, my kids, like, you'd ever send your kids to go get a kid, and you say, "Hey, can you go get your brother?" And they'll say, "Jade!" They just yell at the top of their lungs right in front of you.
It's like, I could have done that.
Not helpful.
Yeah, not helpful.
I wanted you to go over and politely ask them to come back. But anyway, our teachers really teaching us that there's a time and place when we need to maybe be a little more appropriate. But we're talking a little bit more about motivation when our inside voice actually is really important. When we do need to stop being loud and we need to get listening to our inside voice.
Yeah, what you're talking about here is the tongue-in-cheek play on words of inside voice, which you've just had fun with, to your inner dialogue.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And that transition to what does that inner dialogue look like?
Yeah, and what's funny is we've talked to our guests and even the books we've read, it's amazing how many, and even as we just spoke with Jeremiah Sullivan recently, he said the voice that he needs to listen to is the one that is whispering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. Like, you would hope that it's the loud voice that it prevails, but if it does, we actually get weaker. And we're dealing with, okay, what is the quiet voice? What is the inside voice saying? And how do we listen to it more than the one that's like yelling at us to quit or you're not good enough or all those things that really just stop the play?
Yeah, there's a lot of examples and metaphors and analogies that talk about the power of thought in the mind, right? Like, there's an Indian story, like Native American story, that some chief was, mentoring, raising some young man, and they were just having a conversation. And he's like, there's two wolves inside of everyone. Mm-hmm. One is good and one is evil. And the wolf that will win is the one you feed more. Mm-hmm. And, there's another old adage where it's like, what you think becomes what you say becomes what you do becomes who you are, therefore what you think is who you are. So, like, it's interesting because just on those two, and you already mentioned Jeremiah Sullivan, he has, Scar on his one shoulder, who's like this weak voice that tries to pull him into doing less, right, and live
but a very alluring, powerful voice.
Yeah, it's very it's calling out his lesser man.
Yeah,
but it's very alluring because who wants to do things that make you stronger? That is difficult and painful. Mm-hmm. And then he has he talked about the whisper on the other side, or
Simba.
just that Simba. It's that act of defiance, right? The desire for more, and so right there we just rattled off just 3 of 1,000 examples. I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Of how people look at the forces within themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things I think is a pitfall, and I've fallen into this too, but even with social media culture right now, people are really quick to be loud about something. And I'm talking about personal development. I'm not going to talk about other behaviors people do, but somebody says, I am going to run every day. I'm going to do that's it. I'm going to do a diet, or I'm going to whatever. I'm going to read this many books this year, and these kind of things, almost like these sort of resolution type statements. And oftentimes I just feel like the better thing to do, that's great to announce it. And I think you should share the things that you're challenging yourself in with people. I would just be more selective. I think it's better. The more important thing is are you telling yourself those things? Are you telling other people those things?
That's such a good question because I am curious. Are you calling me out?
No, there's no passive aggressive here.
but I'm having fun with that.
No.
But I've gotten into the practice of when I start a new contract with myself,
Yeah.
which is what I'm now calling the challenges. I post about it, but I'm really doing that for social accountability for myself.
Yes.
Right. So like I 100% agree. When I used to tell people, because for me it was like I don't want to tell someone, right? Because if I tell everyone I know, right, hey, I'm going to do like this 110 days of 5Ks at 4 a.m. and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I just removed an out from myself.
Right.
So to your point, I think if you're doing it because you're silencing part of your own weaker inner dialogue that's trying to look for outs, like, go try it for a few days first and see if you want to stick to it or whatever, then it can be a good thing. But if you're doing it for like some bragging machismo garbage, is that what you're talking about?
That's the difference. I say, yeah, the difference between what's the end game? Are you trying to get a reaction out of people? Or are you trying to actually have, if you're trying to strengthen your resolve? I think that's a difference. So that's where social media could be a tool.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I got to put this out there because then when I'm weak, I need to look, oh yeah, I did say I was going to do it, so I'm going to do it. And I want to be someone who's a person of their word. But if you're just looking at, oh, how many likes and shares I get, that is not the correct motivation if you're really going to go the long way. And if you're really going to change your character, not just your physicality or whatever you're trying to attack.
It's interesting because I think just on that note, the social media aspect, it's a very good tool. It's fire, right? Fire is a very helpful tool. But just like fire, man, you can burn the tarnation out of yourself so fast and so easily.
Yeah.
And without like just the slightest slip and you start getting burned, and so even in really small ways, and you just have to, I'm not talking about like, people are burning you. Maybe you're spending too much time scrolling or whatever. And you just have to be very intentional when you use it, right?
Yes, yeah.
Which I'm trying to get consistently better at, right? More parameters around how I interact with it when I use it to make it more and more of a tool and less of a burning up of unnecessary resources.
Right.
But I love the call out there because, I sometimes do some clickbaity things, but it's very intentional to call out that I'm taking myself too seriously. Which is just it's interesting because you say that. I think about this a lot because I don't want to become some like social media sellout type of thing. It's more, this is such a good tool for me to just batter myself. Oh, I'm starting to feel too like cool or whatever. I'm going to go do something stupid, like silly, or, oh, I have like this voice of like, well, no one knows that you're doing this. You can get out whenever you want. Let's just silence that voice. And once it's silenced, it's silenced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that what we're doing when we're sharing whatever challenge we have should be an encouragement. We should be doing it first to ourselves and then to others.
Yeah,
and I think that's what I'm getting to. I think people, even when it's funny even when you state the thing, you're not trying to encourage others in the negative reality. If you're doing it the wrong way. In some ways, I feel like people are just trying to elevate themselves. Like, hey, I just want to let you know I'm doing something, and in their mind, and you're not neener. Versus the opposite, where you're going, hey, I'm doing this, and maybe you can too if you want. I think you mentioned something this morning that you're realizing is that as you challenge yourself more, you're realizing in an authentic way. This is what I'm talking about: authentic. Sharing a challenge and living the challenge, you're realizing the empathy for those who are also doing the same thing. So you're picking it up and going, I understand what you're going through. But then simultaneously having impatience with those who are maybe saying they're trying challenges, but they're really not pushing themselves. They're acting like it or talking about it.
Or actively just swallowing self-deception.
Right.
Right. There's some people in my life right now who I'm watching them lie to themselves. And I'm hoping it's just a season.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also hard because it's like, I want to keep walking with you, brother, but like this line has to stop.
Right.
Because otherwise we just can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
And it's more of heartbreak than callous.
Yeah.
And obviously there's conversations around it, and some of it's too just like letting people go on their own journey and get to where they need to on their own, right? Because it's a mix, but yeah, 100%.
One of the top bestsellers of all time, besides the Bible, it's got number one, is a book called Pilgrim's Progress. And you may have heard the book, but if you haven't read it before, It's actually a brilliant book on journeying through life, and it's an allegory of someone who's journeying up this mountaintop, which is ultimately allegorical of heaven or his salvation. But along the way, it's really interesting. All the people in his life, these are friends and family members, even his wife, that will betray him or will keep him from walking out this path that he knows he must do. And so how he deals with that, and how at times he gets captured and stuck and he can't go on anymore, and how does that play out? But the journey we have, oftentimes we have to start with, what is my inside voice telling me? What is that mission I am on? Because if I don't tell myself, others will, and that's what gets really dangerous.
Yeah, it's like if I don't choose how I'm going to use my time, others will fill it.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
So going back to we're talking a lot about the journey itself, but the inner dialogue on how we interact with ourselves and different impulses and feelings we get really dictates a lot of that journey, and the thought patterns that I allow myself to have, right, really will dictate how the day goes, how I'm responding in the circumstances I'm in, right? Yeah. And for myself, I really see my conversations with myself in my mind as I'm thinking as like a war between who I can become and the lesser man who's the opposite of who I can become, on the two ends of the extreme. And sometimes it's like the Cold War, or it's like super small whispers of deception and like, oh, you can be tired in this, or oh, you can be impatient this, they're acting crazy or whatever. And sometimes it's like I'm in the garage screaming at myself, slamming weights around in a full-on battle with some idea that I've come to, right? But for me, that's how I relate to it. And it's either that, war of deception, or complete just all out like rage fest against myself, trying to get dominance over a weaker version of myself who would not serve my family, my wife as well, myself as well.
How do can you tell me what the characteristics are of we'll call it the voice that is of the weaker man?
Yeah, the lesser.
Well, for fun, the insidious sort of, you don't have to do this.
What's even worse than that? It's like,
yeah,
it's, you don't have to, wake up at 4 is one side of it. It's also like, you can look at that other woman, or you can drink that bottle of whiskey, or it's destructive, right? It goes again. So on one part, I just want to be selfish and free, I say in quotations, in a self-serving type of way, and just pursue pleasure, right? But that leads to a road of nothingness.
Would you say that voice has almost always in it an end game of pleasure or comfort?
I think that's what it's evolved to. It used to just be anger. In my walk, me personally, it used to just be anger and wanting to see things burn, and then it's evolved into, as I've resolved a lot of that, to like, oh, let's just not. Can we avoid the burden of what you can become? And sometimes, like I said, though, it's not uniform. For me, it's very much so depending on the circumstances, what part of myself I'm fighting. But it's like, I was thinking about this. I saw this post the other day, and the guy wrote like "Dear Devil," and he wrote like a note, and it was kind of a stance of defiance. And I went on a run, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, hey, mine would be a little different, because I realize that if I fall, I'm allowing a weakness that could cause many more to fall. Not that they would fall, but I'm causing a weakness, for my wife, for my children, for those I walk closely with. So it's like, not only do I have the joy of pursuing this for myself, but I have a duty to these other people, and that lights an additional fire within me to not give an inch, And for me, it's like, yeah, I can remember the successes I've had in the past when I'm struggling or grinding, but when that even runs dry, I can just remember those whom I'm setting an example for or fighting alongside, and I can pull additional strength from that. So for myself, it's very much so this, I want to put to death this weaker, lesser self in the pursuit of whatever the maximized potential of me can become. But I know that's not the uniform way of self-dialogue. So that's just a few minutes on how I do it, and that's one flavor, right?
It's almost like stepping away from your own situation so you can have another angle on it. It's like, hey, if I were looking at it from my wife's shoes, what would she want from me, or what would she want for me? I should say, not from me, but or what is that friend that in my life? What do they really want for me? And then you're motivating yourself, sort of like, hey, those are other people that I really do care about. It's not just my voice that matters.
Well, yeah, it's like the best way I can look at it is probably my sons, because I have 4 boys, and they all watch the crud out of me. So, and I can see it because they parrot things that make me feel great, right? They'll work out and stuff, and it's like awesome. Then they'll parrot things that make me feel horrible, like they'll chug a sparkling water, like it's a beer, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, I remember candy cigarettes were a thing when we were a kid, probably for a reason.
Exactly.
We were watching.
So it's like, man, if you just pay attention, and that's why I think one of these things is if not. I think that if you aren't aware of these opposing feelings within yourself, it may just be from a lack of allowing self-awareness. Because I think even if you are close to mastery, whatever the heck that would look like, you would have an awareness of like, no, I'm in a place where I'm able to mostly maintain and well-disciplined and controlling the direction I want to go. Not so much that this other part's not there. And so if you feel like, no, I'm in complete unity with myself and I'm doing exactly what I want and everything else, it's like, maybe, but it's probably more likely that you've just not slowed down enough to realize that you're slipping and not climbing, or that you're climbing so hard that you don't realize in one area that you're slipping in these other critical factors and becoming a different type of monster. But I kind of strip it down to that mentality. How do you see it?
I've had to learn as I've gotten older how just unique I am as a person. So I think everyone's unique. I'm not saying I'm unique in my uniqueness, but I will say that it was evident early on that I'm going to be someone who is going to stand out, and just because of the personality pieces I have, and not always in a good way. It's just I'm going to have to deal with the awkwardness I have, or the way I see things, or the way or how impulsive I can be on something when other people know to, maybe you should sit down, buddy. It's always been that way, like class clown, even in elementary, middle school, and just goofing off, because I just had this inside of me realizing how much I want people to react and emote, and that was just fun. That's not a good thing when you're a student and a teacher is trying to keep keep order in the classroom. There's a time and a place, but if I had and I did for seasons let groups of people tell me you're supposed to be this person or act like this, that's a state of misery, because it's not who you are. And if I were mature enough in high school, and how many of us were, to say, you know what, no, this is how I'm made, and if people don't agree with it, hey, I'll be respectful and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, they don't get a vote who I'm going to be.
I love that you just shared that, because I think that's part of the evolution, right?
Yeah.
When you don't have the confidence or self-awareness or maturity or understanding, whatever, I don't know exactly how to describe it, to realize that those negotiations need to be with yourself, and everything else is just data. Right? It's just data to help influence your decisions. Then you do have other people depict it. I just, like, listening to you, I just thought I had a couple of memories come back of like some foolish, asinine things I did in school, trying to seek approval and gain social capital with people that I don't even remember their names now. And, that's not callous. It's just like, it was a long, long time ago. And, it's really interesting, because it's like, I'm just thinking the juxtaposition, right? Is if you overly care about what others think, your actions and therefore who you're becoming is dictated by them. But if you filter it really carefully, it's like, if you tell me something, we have the relationship. I'm going to pay close attention to it and evaluate it.
Yes.
I'm going to test it and see what I need to do, if anything, or how extreme I need to react based on the information, because we have that trust.
Yep.
Same with like my wife and some others. But if I'm, in a social setting and there's a bunch of people and they're like, oh, you should do this, I'm going to be like, oh, okay. It's different, but it's part of that evolution also.
There's wisdom in what is, because you don't want to be like, I don't want to excuse away bad behavior because like this is who I am.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things that maybe are unique to you, that are natural giftings that can be honed and gifted. I've heard too many times, and even as I get honest with myself, there were certain things that I knew about myself, but I let other people tell me who I was and just squashed down. So they became these loud voices when I really should have been like, this is really who I am, and it's not going away, and this is who I want to be.
It's interesting because you said they become these loud voices like in your mind, and just also, verbally they're talking to you. But it's wild because when you're talking about where I really think this inner dialogue comes to head is when you have decided that I want to evolve, transform, and become a better person, right? And maybe that's one of the keys. If that's not a decision you made, maybe it's not there. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I hope to never know, because I want to keep growing as long as I live. So there'll always be this dissonance between who I can become and who I am.
Loud voices, I think, are really just a gift to those whose inner voices are getting strong.
Yeah.
Because like you said, if you say anything and you're actually being consistent on it, you're going to make people uncomfortable.
Yep.
And the more uncomfortable someone gets, the louder they get. And that's just, it's almost like it's almost an encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you're doing something that really matters, you're being consistent, and people are getting more and more angry with you for unwise reasons, you know? I'm not talking like you're cutting them off in traffic and this is my new reality. This is who I am.
Yeah, like unjustified. It's like you're doing something, and by the act of you doing it, it's just frustrating them because it's holding up a mirror.
Yeah, like you simply are holding an ideal that you're only committing to yourself, and they themselves feel as if they're being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
This happens anytime you do any kind of a discipline.
Yep.
People see it.
Along with that, in the pursuit of like becoming better, that's where I think this dialogue really comes in, because that's where you'll have these moments, right? Like your lesser self, or that voice that wants to give you an out, right? That part of you, it knows all of your weaknesses. It knows all of your fears, and that's when they surface. Like for me, the hardest part of like the morning stuff I'm doing right now is not even just getting out of bed. It's when I stand up and I feel some of the pain in my tendons, and it's like, you have 108 more days. And it's like, I don't care. I have today, and I have a plan where I'm more intelligently actually addressing this problem, and I'm going to do it. Mm-hmm. And you just have to combat it. And I think that's the thing. You have to, a lie must be answered with the truth. Mm-hmm. Or a decision, it can't just be ignored. So it's like, what I've realized in myself is, oh, you're not going to make it. You have 108 more days. False, that's not true. Here's how I know I'm going to make it. I'm stretching for 30 minutes a day. I'm doing this for blah, 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 blah. Or just sometimes, too, it's just, hey, shut up. Right? Like sometimes you just have to tell yourself to be quiet. Stop. I'm not thinking right now. I'll think in a few minutes when I'm a little bit more awake or whatever. Like,
I love what you said there. I mean, you kind of breezed through it just now, but you're saying a lie must be answered with the truth, because that to me is the voices. And I'm not saying all voices, but most of the time I'll say the crowd will yell at you with some kind of a lie. They're going to say something that will challenge you, and it's your job to figure out what the truth is, mm-hmm. so that you don't get convinced otherwise.
Well, it's like becoming genuine and authentic with yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what we're talking about. We're admiring from, the perspectives that we have of things that we think are good, some genuineness, some authenticity out there. And it reminds me of like the kid who loves punk, who's like, I'm going to be original and therefore love punk and therefore fit into this entire subculture that loves punk. It's like, well, there's nothing truly new, but the best thing you can do potentially is become authentic to the best of your ability to yourself. Mm-hmm. And I, coming back to the two voices, right? Or that inner dialogue, that inside voice. I want to rephrase the question or re-ask it to you. It's like, how do you negotiate with yourself? Because we started talking about some other things, and for myself, it's very much so either deceptive debate or violent confrontation. But I know that consistently when I'm really strong and winning, I still have that thing looking for a weakness to try and slow me down, bring me down, make me accept less of myself. And that is a constant thing, right? Not to the point that it's like burdensome, but I'm aware of it, right? So I have to always be prepared to continue going in the direction that I think is beneficial. So for you, how do you relate? Because, right, like, do you have a Scar and Simba like Jeremiah? Do you have a War with the Lesser Man like me? Do you scream at yourself in the mirror like Goggins? What is Aaron's flavor?
My flavor is I like to set myself up for a situation where I can win. And the place I win is in competition, meaning if someone says, if there's 10 people in a room and all of a sudden you said competition, that piques my interest right away. Like, we just want to see who can do the most of this thing. I'd be like, okay, now I'm in. And so now the voice is like, okay, are we going to win the contest? Or are we going to lose the contest? And I will say every time I will be max effort, and I will exceed whatever my own expectations are if you tell me there's a competition. And I may not be the strongest guy in the room, but if you give me parameters by which everybody can accomplish it, if there's the level of entry is the same for everybody, we may all have different talents and that kind of thing. That's enough for me. That's all I need. So,
like a great example would be like a distance race where, right, everyone has the same distance to travel.
Yeah. But at the same time, all those people don't have the same amount of experience, maybe, I don't know, or whatever. Maybe it's less about just talent and more about whether or not someone could be consistent in something, or they see themselves as a winner. That's more the kind of thing. So like, I like it when I can see if I can accomplish. It's for me. I was like, I wonder if I could win this competition with myself. I don't want to lose the competition. If I tell myself, oh, that's what it is. What's the win? I guess the goal has to be really clear. How do you win this thing? And then the voice is easy because it's like, we're not winning. We're falling behind. You're not going to get this thing.
Well, that's where I think the voices that's at least in my mind where the voices are.
Yeah.
It's not in the fun things where there's like motivation flash and stuff. It's one more attempt at more clarifying what I'm seeking here is there's a reason that this time, because I just started a 110-day contract with myself where 4 a.m. I wake up and run a 5K. And, the last 100 days I tried this, I got an injury and had to change it up some. There's a reason I'm doing it at 4 a.m. though. And that's because I know I'm going to face more self-adversity and louder voices of dissent against who I can become at 4 a.m. by myself every day for 110 days.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to get stronger in.
Yeah.
I want to get stronger at not just ignoring, but refuting myself at my weakest.
That's good.
And so that's the specific discipline I want to attain. So it's like, how's that for you? Like when you feel the most insecure, the most likely to fail, you're hungry, you're tired, you're depleted, and a choice is presented to you that you can give more or you can give less.
Yep.
And you're struggling. How does that dialogue go for you?
I remember what it feels like when I pulled back and I still finished, and how disappointed I was in myself. I just realize how long the struggle will be with myself if I did pull back, and I got to contend. I have to not contend, but I have to live with myself that I didn't give all I had.
You left it you didn't leave it on the field. Type of thing.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like, as tired as I am, as much as I don't want to do a thing, I actually can do it. I really can. And I think that's what I had to realize is that you felt this before, and then you got to the end and you realize you had more every time.
Yeah.
That is really irritating, especially if it's a long goal. And it's like you had you just pushed that last little bit, you would have won, and you would have validated this entire thing as showing that you can do it. I just don't want to do that at the end.
Right. It's the so really awesome book I'm reading right now. It's called How Bad Do You Want It? It's like a sports psychology book.
Nice.
And one of the premises though to that, it's talking about the true weightiness, the effect that it has, your perception of effort, what if the strong effect that has on things. Because like you just described, if you go and you run a mile or you do whatever is hard, right? When you're done, you know immediately if you could have given more, right? Like the pain goes away and you're like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought. I feel like I could keep going. But I thought I was giving everything I had. It's that lesson that I think you're talking about, right? It's like, oh, my perception of this being difficult was wrong. It was lying to me.
Don't don't tell yourself how much you have when you're at the end of the race.
Yep.
Tell yourself what you have at the front of the race. That way, when it comes to you, when you're contending with yourself, you go, no. I know what I have.
Yep.
I already told myself what I have. In fact, my goal is to beat that perception of what I thought I had, and not to concede at the end because that voice will tell you, no, you never had it. You shouldn't even been in this thing in the first place. Mm-hmm. That's the hard part.
So for you, it's very much long and short term competition, and am I giving all of myself? And your counterbalance is I'm leaving something. I'm not giving enough of myself to feel accomplished here, or I am. Is that a fair assessment?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, the imagery for me is just is the incline or is a sales contest I did or whatever. It was not about me beating the people. It was about me seeing if I could see if I was good enough to even be in the room. I think that's the more the biggest thing. So
your mind's like in the arena of competition.
Yeah, it's like qualifying myself to be one of the people that tried, because I'll be okay if I lose to a great person, but I went way further than I would have gone on my own. That's fine. I'm good with that loss. But ultimately, I want to prove that I am a contender. I'm going to go for it.
And you want to build the trust in yourself that you're going to give it everything you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I can absolutely relate. And we just have two analogies, right? So that's your flavor and mine's, but it's in the pursuit of the same thing. Mm-hmm. Do I trust if I say I'm going to do something, that I'm going to do it? And not that I'm just going to check the block, but I'm going to give it everything I have. Mm-hmm. I think that's like the pursuit, right? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because if you come into a point of friction in the pursuit of something where you're questioning your resolve, like why in the heck am I doing this, right? Because that, there's seasons and differences in how the conversation plays out as you go through struggle. But it sometimes just comes down to a simple question. Do I want to push harder into this despite knowing if I can give even more than I want to lay off?
Yeah.
Right? And if you study endurance races, you see a lot of that. Like when you're on mile 90 of 100 and there's, the two leads are competing with each other. They're fighting each other, but they're really fighting, do I want this more than I want to give myself the opportunity to breathe a little bit more? Do I want this more than this other guy wants it? And it comes down to, what do I want more? And that in your competition thing, it's like, well, if I'm giving everything I know I can give, do I want this more than calling that good enough?
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe you are giving everything you have and it's not enough, but maybe you find more and you can push even further.
Yep.
And then that now sets a new minimum boundary in your mind that you can point to say, nope, I got this. We can keep going.
Yeah.
Shush. Type of thing.
It feels like a fight between the peacemaker and the peacekeeper. Because the peacekeeper is one that's like, I don't want to argue about this anymore. Let's just concede and whatever. And then so much negativity pulls into that, and so much toxicity lives there. But the peacemaker says, okay, I'm willing to have the hard conversation. I'll argue whatever it takes, because I want to live in health.
Yeah.
I want to live in strength, and I want to live in growth.
Yep. I agree. I think that looking at it, what that just reminds me of is that even though we're talking about, your inside voice, your inner dialogue with yourself, the conversations you have when you're alone and tired and hungry, or the conversations you have right alongside someone in some form of extreme output where you're just questioning your why am I here type of moments, right? Why am I trying? Why am I doing this? It's fed in advance by that which you allow to influence yourself. Whether it's something you read or a meal you ate or the people you have in your life. I think that there's a direct correlation over time, whether you want to call it watering the lawn or your ecosystem, whatever it is. If you have people who are pulling more out of you and speaking life into the better version of yourself, you're going to, I believe, be better positioned to go further than if you don't develop that network of support. Or even worse, you allow yourself to be comforted by being around a bunch of people who aren't striving for better.
I completely agree. I think, and even what you're saying there is the people in your life should be, is a physical manifestation of what that inside voice looks like. And what I mean by that is that when I'm healthy and I'm listening to my inside voice, I say things like, Aaron, you're a contender. Like, you're dangerous when there's a competition. You're a good friend. You're someone who shows up. You're someone who's authentic. When I'm weak and I'm listening to that other voice, I'm worthless. I shouldn't even be here. People are better off without me being in the room. And your friends are the ones that bring you back to that and say, what are you talking about? That's not who you are at all. Real friends, the good ones, if you picked them right in the room, they help that little voice get a little louder.
Well, I think that's part of the natural filtration process or maturation of who you spend your time with, because we all have those friends who are like, oh man, just take tonight off. Let's go hang out and do this. And sometimes maybe that is the thing you need most, and you're just being bullheaded. But I think most people can empathize and understand what I'm talking about here. We all know those people who it's like, no, I'm on this plan. It's disciplined. It's balanced. I'm where I need to be, and therefore I need to fulfill this commitment. And it's like, oh, no, just let's go do this instead. All right, why don't you just rest, man? It's got to be tiring. And it's like there's that voice, right? That type of friend. And it's like, I don't know about that. And then you have the other friends like, man, I'm tired and beat up. And instead of encouraging, yeah, you should rest, if that's not the dire necessity that you have, it's like, Aaron, you've done this before. You've done this every day. You've shown up. You can show up today. It doesn't matter if you set a record today for yourself. It matters that you show up. You can show up. Right. You got this, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of friend who's like, no, don't give yourself an out right now. You don't need this out. You need to show up.
Yeah.
Right?
He's like, you sound like my inside voice.
Those are the two different types of people. But we all have both people. And sometimes we have to live with both types of people. And the question then is like, oh my goodness, depending on the relationship, how do I help influence a voice that may be more like this to become more on the side, like more on the, how do I influence a voice that's more on the, stop making me uncomfortable with your pursuit of a better version of yourself, into someone who's who is more likely to champion my growth because it's become attractive to them and they want it for themselves as well. And now we're co-journeying together, right? And that's the thing. We were talking earlier about, I don't know who coined it, but it's like people are put in your life for a reason or a season.
Yeah.
Right. And I even think we talked about this last week with Jeremiah, but I don't recall. But at the end of the day, it's like we want to cling. We're like naturally sentimental creatures, especially with friendships. It's like, oh, but they were my friends in high school. That's great. That was a great season. Maybe maybe they still should be. I don't know. That's part of the evaluation. But just because they were doesn't mean they are or should be, right? And in that, I don't know, it's a difficult journey to assess, right? But maybe I'm not good for them, or maybe they're not good for me, or maybe we're both great, but we're going in different directions and therefore impeding each other unnecessarily because we're being over sentimental. It's not like you have to break up with people. It's just like sometimes you just have to let it go and let it naturally flow where it flows and realize, hey, we're going in directions that we have less and less touch points, but maybe we talk every 10 years and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's like the ecosystems we talked about,
Yeah.
right? It's like, hey, I got to change the environment I'm in right now so that I can accomplish this thing that I know has to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? Like look at what we're doing with this. And it's nothing special, but it's special to us.
Mm-hmm.
This being the grit theory, it's like we are showing up early in the morning to make this happen. We are hitting our other workouts. We're prioritizing time on our weekends, having, done the family social negotiations with our family and trying to share the joy of this with them out of love, right? So it's a positive thing. It's like all those things demand sacrifice. And sometimes that may be in relationships with others or it's with the comfort with yourself or whatever. But I guess this conversation is a lot more complex than I thought because I'm finding I can't really pin down like, okay, so what's the key takeaway with inner voices, right?
Yeah, you wish it was sort of a sequence. Or, okay, here's my to-do list when the chips are down. Okay, step 1,
It's a bog, man. It's a muddy, muddy bog.
It is.
It's a swamp. And the only thing I can think of, if I had to draw a line the best I could through the conversation, is when you're talking about having an upholding inner dialogue with yourself. Good luck. It's probably it's a journey unique to each person, but I think the core requisite to doing it is being still and silent enough to acknowledge what's at play in your own head.
Yes.
Coupled with putting yourself in positions that push you out of comfort so that both voices become active at once.
And what are you going to do about it?
And then it's what are you going to do, right? Because
I like that.
it's just like I have no idea what this inner dialogue is. It's like, okay, are you pushing yourself, like genuinely pushing yourself to accomplish more in some area?
Yeah.
And are you allowing yourself the time to be still and think about what's going on inside?
Yep.
If you're doing both, I would posit that then you'll start to kind of get that feeling of like, oh no, I'd rather sit on the couch or sleep or whatever, versus go out and do that run, just as a metaphor or as an example. And then you can be like, okay, how am I responding to those two desires? Right? Because typically, like for the run, it's like, how am I going to feel when I'm done? And then for the feeling of staying in bed, it's like, well, I know how I'm feeling now, and it's pretty great. So it's like, how do you do in the dissonance? And this is another thing I just realized. I want to hear your thoughts on this. It's how do you deal with the dissonance between two things you want?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's part of this, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to stay in bed. You also want to get up and grow and become something more. So it's answering the question of which do you want to feed?
The tension I feel is that desire is always going to be there in some direction to do whatever we enjoy, be they noble or nefarious, that we have to contend with. But I'll say that the problem that we struggle with right now, I think in society, is we have never had more pleasure available to us, more comfort, more things we can do or just enjoy or whatever is all there. The entertainment that we are exposed to is off the charts, like we've never had before. But what they do is they serve as distractions. In fact, the word amusement means muse means to think, a means to not. Amusement is literally not thinking, and we have an entire society, an entire culture that says don't think, enjoy, be entertained. What you're talking about right now is like which desire do I go to? Well, I would say the question that should come first, we're talking about is who am I really, and what do I really want to achieve? Because you can have entertainment along the way, that's fine, but it's absolutely subservient to what am I trying to accomplish with my life. And that's because and this is why I say we're in a not thinking culture. Not thinking disallows you from even asking the question.
See,
what is my inner voice saying?
so on that point,
Yeah.
this idea jumped into my head. It's like, okay, 150 years ago, instead of ignoring the question was another question was louder, and that's surviving, right? Like, I need to ensure that I have enough resources that my family and I don't starve to death, that whatever threat doesn't kill us.
It wasn't like, shall we dance? It's like, well, first.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, because I'm just thinking, it's like, okay, over time, right? And there's always been pockets and small percentages of people who have to contend with that question, or who ignore it and do the amusement thing, right? So we always have those pockets of society. But for a long time in human history, most people may never have gotten to the chance to actually ask that question because they were not in a resource-rich enough environment to be afforded the opportunity, right? It's like, I need to build this house so we don't freeze this winter. I need to make sure that put a crop in the field so we don't starve. I need to hunt so that we have dinner, So if that's, it goes back to, I forget the guy's name, the hierarchy of needs. It's like, that is a acceptable reason not to ask the question. But what you're talking about is, we live in a time now where the majority of the population, instead of a small minority, has this question looming in front of them. And I think the proclivity is to pursue amusement and entertainment and distraction over facing the question.
Yes, I mean, hedonists make terrible farmers.
Yeah.
They're the whole time complaining about the process. And the farmer's like, I'm putting in the seed because the mission is water, nurture this thing, and there will be fruit someday.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't understand that, you don't understand why you're doing this thing, you're just going to be mad at the dirt and wondering if you can go play and do whatever you want while weeds grow in the garden. And that may be your life, and that may be what you decide to do. But we're talking about, hey, I'm really focusing on making this successful.
It's interesting because there's a lie that, I think it's a lie, that pain is pain and pleasure is pleasure, right? So why would I ever do this uncomfortable thing? Because it's just painful. But I'm in the discipline of retraining my mind to think that which is uncomfortable and painful is the most fantastic pleasure imaginable.
Happy in your pain.
I'm happy in my pain because I firmly believe, aside from that self-contentment and acceptance and peace is probably the biggest thing, at least I'm in pursuit of, right? Contentment and peace, to be okay sitting still with myself. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to encourage my sons to be better men, I hope, and my wife to live a more vibrant life. And outside of that, it's really my wife live a more vibrant life, and then my sons to become better men. And then outside of that, to encourage my friends to the same. But that's what brings pleasure. It's like, okay, if I put myself in this terrible situation that I absolutely abhor and hate, and it is terrible, I, over time, am learning I can actually find more and more pleasure in the pain of the lesson, knowing how much better I'm going to be able to sit with contentment with myself and therefore love those around me.
That's really good. That's really good. And you're talking about because you're putting the time in, it's almost like you can drink deeper of the things that are in your life. You can find more happiness and contentment because you allowed yourself to go through the difficulty or the painful process too. And so that should bring you joy. It's like, because one shakes hand with the other. Mm-hmm. It's like, why would I be mad at the labor of the thing when I realize it brings this wonderful fruit in my life?
Yeah. It also makes the pleasures more pleasurable, right?
Yeah.
And when something is good in the proper season and the proper time, that's wonderful. And it's like, hunger is the best seasoning.
Absolutely. And hunger is earned, man.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever had a big, long hike day or something that was really exerting, or even you just went through some really challenging thing in your life and for a long period of time, man, that food tastes so good at the end of the day, doesn't it?
It's
more than it ever has before.
It's just like the nights that you get in bed because you're like, I know I need to sleep so I can perform better tomorrow. I'm checking the block. Versus the nights where you hit that bed like, haggard, smoking, and torn up, and you're like, oh, "This is such a gift." Like, just you lay down, you're like, "This is wonderful."
Just ever bit into bread and just savored every chew? Yeah, just every chew. Like, oh, this is so good.
Exactly, and that's where it's like, yeah, the pleasures become better, the gifts become sweeter as well. That's even an additional thing in choosing to engage in this inner dialogue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think as we think about our inside voice, I think one, take the time to think about what that is. And then secondly, think about how often you're listening to it. And then thirdly, and I think most importantly, is what activities are happening as a result.